Frank watched with deepening concern as Rex, their normally gentle German shepherd, once again took his position beside the baby's crib. Evening had settled over their modest home, and just like the past 2 weeks, Rex's reaction remained the same. His ears stood rigid, his posture tense, and a low, steady growl rumbled from deep within his chest. "I just don't get it," Frank murmured to his wife Ellen, who lingered in the nursery doorway watching. For 5 years, Rex had been an inseparable part of their family. Adopted from the shelter, he had always been the kindest, most affectionate dog, especially with the neighborhood kids, who loved stopping to pet him during their evening strolls. When they brought baby Daniel home 3 months ago, Rex had instantly taken on the role of protector. He would lie peacefully beside the crib during naps, his tail flicking gently whenever Daniel made a noise. But then 2 weeks ago, something changed, and now, without fail, every single night Rex stood guard. Growling spring was bringing warmer nights, and Frank had inspected the nursery countless times. The windows were locked, the screens intact. There was no sign of my squirrels or anything that could explain Rex's sudden fixation. Yet his unwavering attention remained locked on the same corner of the room. Even when Daniel slept soundly, Ellen had suggested a trip to the vet, wondering if Rex was experiencing discomfort or anxiety, but the checkup revealed nothing. He was in perfect health. The vet explained that dogs can sense environmental changes that humans might miss, like subtle sounds or shifts in air pressure, determined to understand. Frank had spent hours observing Rex. The dog's growls weren't aggressive. They weren't meant to intimidate. Instead, it felt like a warning. The same way he reacted to unfamiliar noises outside, he wasn't hostile toward Daniel. If anything, he seemed intent on shielding him from something in that corner. "Maybe we should have someone check the house," Ellen suggested one evening as Rex resumed his nightly watch. "Remember last fall, he kept scratching at the kitchen wall, and we ended up finding a leaking pipe inside." She wasn't wrong. Rex's instincts had been right before, and the very next day, Frank noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. While changing Daniel's diaper, he felt a faint draft right from the very corner that had captured Rex's attention for weeks. It was almost imperceptible, but just enough to make the baby mobile above the crib sway ever so slightly. Could this be what had been bothering Rex all along? Dogs were known for their heightened senses, their sharp hearing, picking up sounds well beyond human perception. If something was wrong, Rex would know. Margaret mentioned something the other day, Ellen said thoughtfully. During that last big storm, she noticed water stains on her wall, the one that backs right up to Daniel's nursery. That evening, as Rex took his usual position by the crib, Frank brought in a step ladder. The dog remained still, watching intently, his body tense but unmoving. Frank switched on his flashlight and examined the corner closely. What he found made his stomach tighten. Thin cracks snaked across the ceiling, paint branching out like a delicate W. Pressing a hand against the wall, he felt it, a faint vibration, subtle but undeniably there. Daniel remained undisturbed, sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic breaths above the crib. The baby mobile turned slowly in the drifting air, casting eerie shifting shadows against the nursery walls. Rex's eyes tracked those shadows, but his focus always returned to the corner, and whenever the vibration seemed to intensify, so did his growl. Ellen spent the night quietly researching on her tablet, speaking in hushed tones as she shared what she'd found. It could be anything, she whispered. A loose pipe, shifting foundation, even temperature changes in the walls. She hesitated. But what's strange is that Rex only reacts at night. Something changes when the house cools down. Determined to get to the bottom of it, they decided to take turns staying up. During Frank's watch just past midnight, something new caught his attention. The draft had strengthened, and with it came a barely audible sound, not quite a whistle, but a faint rushing noise from deep within the wall. Rex's ears flicked With each new sound his growl steady. Unwavering, Frank lifted Daniel from his crib, holding him close as he moved. Around the room as he neared the corner, Rex instantly rose and followed, positioning himself between them and the wall. The dog wasn't hostile, but there was no mistaking the intensity of his stance as loyalty and protective. Instincts as sharp as ever as Frank placed Daniel back into the crib, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Rex had always been a part of their family, but tonight more than ever Frank understood this wasn't just loyalty, it was a silent, unwavering warning. The home inspector would arrive soon, but until then, one thing was certain: Rex wasn't going anywhere. He would stand guard just as he had every night before. That night as Frank finally settled into bed, leaving Rex at his self-appointed post, an uneasy feeling lingered. They were close to uncovering something important, something Rex had sensed long before they had. Whatever it was, Frank was grateful their loyal companion had warned them before it escalated into something far worse. Sometimes, he reflected, animals notice what humans overlook. By early Thursday morning, the home inspector arrived, his experienced gaze immediately landing on Rex, who remained alert. By the crib dogs are often better than any tool we have, he remarked, setting down his equipment. They can hear water moving, shifting things we'd never detect without instruments. As Frank described Rex's unusual behavior, Ellen stood nearby, gently rocking Daniel in her arms. The inspector listened, attentively nodding as he began his assessment. He checked the walls for alignment, ran levels across the floor, and measured for any signs of structural movement. Then, when he reached the infamous corner, something shifted. His level tilted ever so slightly. This is interesting, he murmured, pressing a hand against the wall. He retrieved a moisture meter and ran it along the surface. The moment he reached the section where Rex had been fixated for weeks, the number spiked. There's elevated moisture here, he confirmed, and look at this. He aimed his flashlight at the baseboards, revealing a faint, almost imperceptible dark line. Rex didn't budge, his amber eyes locked onto the inspector's every movement, his ears flicking forward. When the inspector rapped lightly against the wall, a low whine escaped Rex's throat. It wasn't his usual growl, it was something more urgent, as if confirming that someone had finally noticed what he'd been trying to warn them about. As the house, his findings became even more concerning. Moisture wasn't just affecting the walls, it had begun to compromise the very foundation. If this had gone unnoticed for a few more months, you could have had serious structural issues. The inspector warned the water damage would have kept spreading, eventually compromising this entire corner of the house. Your dog may have just saved you from a much bigger disaster. Frank crouched down, running a hand over Rex's head for the first time. Dazed, the dog's posture eased. A silent alarm finally acknowledged. The inspector wasted no time in laying out the next steps. The repairs were urgent but manageable. With prompt action, they could prevent further damage. He handed over a detailed report and recommended a few trusted contractors who could handle both the water issue and the internal damage. That evening, as they waited for contractor estimates, Rex remained at his usual post near the crib, but this time something had changed. His growls were softer, his stance less rigid, as if he knew help was finally on the way. Following the inspector's advice, Frank and Ellen moved Daniel's crib to their bedroom for the time being. As Frank watched Rex trail them down the hall, the dog pausing for one last glance at the nursery corner, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Rex had sensed the danger long before they had, and in doing so he had likely prevented something far worse. Ellen, sitting on the bed with Daniel cradled in her arms, glanced over at their ever-watchful companion. We should get Rex something special, she suggested, smiling as the dog curled up beside them. He tried so hard to warn us, and we finally listened. Frank nodded, thinking about how many times throughout history dogs had protected their families in ways humans didn't. Immediately understand the contractors. Arrived the following week, but nothing could have prepared Frank for what they found the moment they opened the wall. A sickening truth was revealed far worse than the initial inspection had suggested. The wooden support beam in that corner had rotted to a dangerous degree, its structure weakened by years of slow creeping moisture. Black mold clung to sections of the insulation, hidden deep within the cavity. And then came the worst part. The contractor ran his hand along the damaged beam, shaking his head. This wasn't just about water, he said grimly. This beam was shifting under the house's weight if it had given way. He exhaled sharply. Let's just say your dog didn't just save you from water damage, he might have saved your whole house. Frank's chest tightened as he turned toward Rex, who sat watching from the doorway, his amber eyes steady. What they had mistaken for paranoia had been a warning they had almost ignored. Frank watched as the workers carefully documented the damage, thinking about all the nights Rex had stood guard, sensing the unseen danger lurking behind that wall. While Frank continued working, Ellen took time off from teaching to oversee the repairs. It didn't take long for her to notice something fascinating. Rex's behavior was changing, gone with a tense, restless evenings of growling at the corner. Now he followed the contractors around, watching them intently as they stripped away the damaged materials. The workers quickly grew fond of their unexpected supervisor, amused by how he perked up whenever they neared the once troublesome spot. One afternoon, their local veterinarian who had examined Rex during the initial ordeal stopped by to check on him. She wasn't surprised by what had happened. Dog perceived the world in ways we don't, she explained. Rex wasn't just hearing the water or creaking what he was likely detecting the instability of the entire structure. Their senses pick up on vibrations and shifts we'd never notice as repairs progressed. Word spread through the neighborhood. Frank and Ellen were stunned to learn that several other homes had similar issues, though none had been caught as early as theirs. Their elderly neighbor Margaret scheduled an inspection and found early signs of water damage in her own walls. The contractor explained that the recent extreme weather had caused widespread problems, though most homeowners remained unaware. One evening, as Frank stood in the nursery, the setting sun casting a golden glow through the plastic sheeting covering the unfinished wall, he noticed something different. Rex, the ever vigilant guardian, was no longer pacing, no longer growling, no longer fixated on the corner as if it held some unseen threat. Instead, he lay calmly on his bed, his golden eyes following the workers as they'd packed up for the day. For first time in weeks, Rex looked at peace. The danger had passed, and he knew it. 2 weeks later, the repairs were complete. Daniel had grown used to sleeping in his parents' room, and Rex had adjusted to the temporary arrangement. But every day he would still inspect the nursery, watching the workers with what could only be described as approval. The contractors joked that he was their most dedicated quality control inspector. Frank couldn't stop telling people about what had happened at the park while watching Daniel play on a picnic blanket with Rex beside him. He shared their story with other parents. Animals sense things we don't, he would say, watching Rex nuzzle Daniel gently. Sometimes they're strange. Behavior isn't strange at all. They're trying to tell us something important. The story gained so much attention that the local veterinary clinic invited Frank to speak at a pet owner's workshop. Rex's story became a case study in why paying attention to pets could prevent serious household dangers. Ellen put together a simple but compelling presentation showing photos of the damaged wall, the repairs, and of course, Rex's unwavering vigilance. By the time the nursery was fully restored and Daniel was back in his crib, Rex had resumed his usual spot by the door, but this time his watchful eyes held no tension, only quiet confidence. Frank ran a hand through his fur. You knew all along, didn't you, buddy? Rex thumped his tail against the floor in response, and Frank understood they had trusted Rex to protect them, and once again he had as. The final repairs wrapped up Frank. Couldn't shake the thought of how dangerously close they had come to disaster if they had ignored Rex's persistent warnings if they had dismissed his behavior as simple restlessness or anxiety. The outcome could have been far worse. The contractor assured them that with the new support, beam upgraded waterproofing, and STRL reinforcements, their home was now safer than ever. Rex, of course, received plenty of praise and extra treats, though what seemed to matter most to him was simply watching over Daniel. His restless pacing was gone, his anxious growling had faded into peaceful naps near the newly repaired wall. Frank often caught himself standing in the nursery doorway watching the unspoken bond between his son and their ever-vigilant protector. Then came the moment of truth, the day they moved down Daniel's crib back into the nursery. The walls were freshly painted the same. Soft yellow, the windows sealed, and new baseboards installed, but most importantly, the dangerous rotting beam had been replaced with a solid, unshakable support. Frank and Ellen held their breath as Rex stepped into the restored room. Would he sense something? Still ice? Would he growl, hesitate? Rex did what he always did. He inspected his nose, worked carefully along the baseboards, lingering on the corner that had troubled him for weeks. Frank and Ellen exchanged a nervous glance. Then, with a satisfied huff, Rex flopped down near the window, stretching out with an air of contentment. No growls, no tension. His silence was a reassurance they had been waiting for that evening as Daniel slept in his crib for the first time in weeks. The difference was striking. The draft that had once stirred his mobile was gone. On the room felt sturdy, safe. Rex lay by the crib, not standing guard, with wary eyes, but resting, lifting his head occasionally to check on Daniel before settling back down. Word of their experience spread quickly, and soon the local newspaper ran an article about their story, focusing on the importance of home maintenance and paying attention to pets. Frank and Ellen framed a copy, hanging it in the nursery alongside a picture of Rex, a reminder of the discovery that it saved, gave their home, and the loyal guardian who had made it possible. Even the contractor took notice. From then on, he made a habit to ask new clients if their pets had been behaving strangely around certain areas, realizing that animals often sense structural issues long before humans did. As spring melted into summer, life found its rhythm again. Rex's protective nature remained, but now it showed in quieter ways. He positioned himself between Daniel and strangers at the door. He gave a soft bark when the baby woke from a nap. His evening growling never returned, though he still made his rounds, particularly after rainstorms. Just in case Daniel, now crawling and pulling himself up on furniture, had grown more attached to his furry guardian. Rex, with endless patience, adjusted. He moved carefully around the baby's unsteady steps, instinctively positioning himself to prevent falls. Their bond deepened. Daniel would reach for Rex's thick fur to steady himself, and Ellen captured countless photos of their growing friendship. Frank, too, had changed. He had learned to listen more closely, not just to Rex, but to the subtle ways animals communicate. He noticed a distinct tones in Rex's barks, one for visitors, another for delivery trucks, and a soft, almost pleading whine when Daniel needed attention. The story of Rex's warning spread through the neighborhood, leading several families to schedule inspections. Their elderly neighbor Margaret was among them. Thanks to Rex's story, her home's water damage was caught early before it could spiral into something worse. She made a habit of bringing special treats, proudly telling anyone who would listen how he had protected not just his own family, but others in the community as well. As fall approached, they celebrated Rex's birthday with a special dinner. Ellen made his favorite meal, plain chicken with carrots, and they surprised him with a new bed for the nursery. Daniel, now standing with more confidence, reached out, patting Rex's head with wobbly coordination. Dog, he squealed his first attempt at the word. Rex accepted the attention with quiet Patience's eyes filled with something Frank could only describe as devotion. That night, as Frank did his final check, before bed, he paused in the nursery. Doorway, Rex lay on his new bed position, so he could see both Daniel's crib and the once troubled corner of the room. Months ago, this spot had been a source of unease, of restless pacing, and unrelenting growls. Now it was a place of peace. Frank exhaled, running a hand through Rex's fur. "You knew, didn't you?" he murmured. Rex thumped his tail once against the floor, and Frank understood. Their home stood strong, their son slept safely, because when Rex had tried to warn them, they had finally listened. They never imagined that the most crucial warning of their lives wouldn't come in words, but in the quiet, unwavering alerts of a loyal friend. As Frank switched off the light, Rex LED out, a deep, contented sigh settling into his watch with the quiet confidence of a guardian who knew his family was finally safe. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next tale on screen now.